Hello again. This is a continuation of the um, discussion of the body paragraphs of the IWA. So in the last screencast, I discussed this particular piece about the regulation of night shift work and talked about some of the good qualities and some of its shortcomings as well. That was a high scoring essay. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this middle scoring essay, and of course, we'll read some. Now, you haven't seen this one before, so I'm going to go ahead and read the introduction and remind you that for the high scoring introductions or the first few body paragraphs of papers, they're going to put the work, the question, the problem in context, and one that highlights its significance. So this one is called How Do Adults' Perception of Video Games Affect Children? Video games are one of the most popular sources of entertainment all over the world. It is played by people of all ages nearly every day. Due to the many amount of players, there are those who do not play that raise many opinions of video games. Often children do not think of much of video games besides that they are simply games to enjoy. Meanwhile, those who are older and more aware of consequences will pass judgment on the games and how they affect society. Many adults will argue that video games are a negative influence for young children, and adults' perception of video games affects their children's ability to play video games as they are the ones purchasing the game and in control of their kids. Due to the many negative perception of video games from parents, it will often lead parents to avoid buying their children video games. However, video games can be beneficial to everyone in multiple ways. Okay, so this one does a little bit better of a job than the superhero or super soldiers paper did that started off with tangential, somewhat unrelated topic to introduce it. We do get a little bit more about the context here, but there isn't any kind of specific data or facts to establish the context. For instance, how many children play video games? How do they feel about it? Are there negative effects? Do they have like guilty consciences for playing video games? Or, I mean, what's going on? Why does this matter right now? This just basically sums up something that the writer could have already have been thinking about, and that is that parents often disapprove of video games. Children like to play them, so there must be some problem there somewhere. Also, down here at the bottom, as I noted here, there's a real lack of focus here. Is this paper really going to be about the perception of video games of adults and how that perception shapes the way their kids think about playing it? Or is it going to be about how video games are beneficial to everyone in multiple ways? Those are two related, but they're different papers. You just can't focus on both of those in one paper and do a good job. You're going to divide up the focus of the paper, and that's automatically going to lose you points. Okay, so now getting into the body paragraphs of this, you'll see that this just isn't as good as the previous one, even though the previous one wasn't perfect. So let's look at this first topic sentence here. Right there, it says there are many mixed opinions about video games. Now, on the other one, it talked about how there is a correlation between negative health outcomes and night shift work, which is a cause and effect relationship. This one doesn't say anything about cause and effect. It just says, well, there are many mixed opinions about video games. So, well, why does that matter? It's not clear why this claim is important to the paper. If it said something like the negative opinions of adults are attributed to their lack of knowledge of gaming and its benefits, well, that would be something. But this is just wide open. There's mixed opinions. And of course, that's way too general. So this writer then is going to dive in. Some adults believe that video games are a waste of time. Again, why? You know, if we could explore the why there, that might be an interesting way to advance this paper, but no, because we're just going to go with the survey. According to a survey conducted by Pew Research Center, and that's good, by the way. The Pew Research Center is a great source. Attitudes About Games found that about 1/4 of all adults think most games are a waste of time, while a similar number, 24%, do not think that this is true of most games. 1/3 thinks some video games are a waste of time, while others are not, and 16% are not sure. Whites. Now, as far as why we're getting into the other demographics here, like race, is not very clear. And age, like, why are we getting into this information about level of education and so forth? It's not really explained why. We're just delivering something that we found without any particular purpose to it. And so that's part of the reason why this doesn't score very well. But we learned that whites, 28%, those 65 or older, 32%, and those with at least a high school diploma, 27%, are more likely than others to think most video games are a waste of time. Those who play games were also reported to agree with most positive depictions of gaming, while those who did not play mostly disagreed. Okay, so this sounds like it could be the seed of something interesting for the whole paragraph. But notice how that it's kind of just buried in here. It's not giving any emphasis. It's not developed in any way as part of the argument. It's just, hey, here's something else that I learned from this survey. I'm just going to lump all this stuff together. You figure out what I'm going for. So there it is. And then it moves on. The survey gave a general perception of what different age groups in the United States thought of gaming, with a fairly large amount of adults believing that some games are a waste of time. So in the end, I get out of this, I'm like, well, so what? I mean, why? Do these adults play? Do they know anything about games? Where do these negative ideas come from? Are they stereotypes? But there's nothing of substance here to answer any of my deeper questions about this. So obviously, remember that if this argument is supposed to be convincing, with all these unanswered questions, I'm probably going to be less confident in whatever position the writer takes, because I have lots and lots of information that's not here for me. Okay, so moving on to the next paragraph. This one begins a little bit better. This one, the topic sentence says, whoops, whoa. Sorry. The typical parent will also fear that when children play games, they develop unhealthy habits such as becoming antisocial, staying indoors, and even becoming addicted to the games. Hey, that's great. Antisocial, staying indoors, those are close enough related to where we can make a paragraph out of that. Game addiction, that might be another paragraph. That's probably what I would do for that if I were going to make this paper myself, is break those up into two. But in any case, at least we have something about why parents fear it. But look what happens then. There is a wide variety of video gaming genres and types to choose from. Whoa, well, where did that come from? I mean, I expected a conversation here about, or to learn something about adults' fears and why they have them, or whether they're founded or not. But all of a sudden I'm getting, whoa, there's different genres to choose from. So I don't know where that information is coming from. So now I'm lost. One of these options is single player, where only one person gets to play. In this situation, a child can be so involved in the game or personally prefer single player games that they become antisocial. And so now I kind of see, even though the transitions were missing that would help me understand why this person is talking about this, I can infer here that this is how it's related. But does this come from the research, or is this just what the adults are fearing? Like, how did we come up with that from what we've already covered so far? No indication. We're just drawing a conclusion. Maybe that's a claim. Let's see if it's proven. When the child becomes so interested in a game, they may invest all their time into it and choose to stay inside playing it rather than going outside to interact with others and exercise. And last but not least, but whoa, wait a minute. Where's the data on that? And is that coming from adults' fears, or are we talking about reality here? Does this really happen? And last but not least, when a child is so invested in a game they can become obsessed with it, the New York Times article, Video Games, Diversion or a Danger, Dr. Michael Lewis, professor of psychiatry, psychology and pediatrics at Rutgers University Medical School, University of Medicine, and Dentistry of New Jersey states, the intensity of the experience is worrisome. And as you can tell here from my comment over here, I'm thinking, whoa, all of this, and this is good in general, right? I mean, we've got this, obviously, this credible person. All of that was just to introduce this little claim right here, that the intensity of the video game experience is worrisome. Worrisome to him based upon data, or just worrisome because he's worried about it. It's not, there's nothing here. This is lacking any kind of real substance. There's no research. There's no fact here. This is just, now it's just some expert's worry. So we're not really getting anywhere. The intensity and exposure to violent graphics are what mainly worries adults. When playing, children are not simply viewing an alien getting killed, but they are the ones doing the killing. They are put in place in place of the killers. The professor also addresses these common fears in parents. Okay, so now I know, even though this is really awkwardly put together, that these were the fears of parents. But I had to go back and infer that, which is another part that hurts this score. The professor also addresses these common fears in parents, especially in children between the ages of 2 and 6, when there is some concern about the nature of the construction of reality. One of the dangers is that electronics can replicate realities in ways that mechanical games can't. We must ask, what is the point at which the game seems real? This is kind of interesting because it is suggesting here that there's some research maybe out there that suggests that video games aren't all 100% purely beneficial. This one sort of conflates the two, parents' fears and then maybe some stuff about some legitimate concerns here about video games, but it's all tangled up. I can't really separate that out in my mind. An adult's fear or worrying can cause certain actions in order to prevent dangerous or bad situations from occurring. It is important for parents to make wise judgments in order to help their children. An adult's perception of the matter of video games greatly affects their children's ability to play. Now, there's no proof of this. It didn't actually establish a correlation between how adults feel about video games and then how their kids play it at all, but I think it's already done with that whole argument. Now it's just going to move on to video games being beneficial for kids, which seems to be like what this student was really genuinely interested in. In any case, this one is kind of a mess. It doesn't really support the central question. There is no central question. There's two questions, and it's not very focused. So obviously you can see that this one has many flaws that this one up here does not demonstrate, even though this one is not perfect. This is much more in-depth. This stays much more focused. I highlighted some of the ways in which this writer is establishing a kind of continuity between the paragraphs. Between the sentences. So words like most notably, this is because, these rhythms, close to further reasons. This person is using these little signposts to organize the paragraphs and to walk us through so that we can see how this argument is moving. We can see the cause and effect. We can see the examples as they pop up, and we know always what the writer is talking about. The other one down here, right, I kind of had to keep going back and forth to kind of figure out what the person was referring to, because this person left all the hard work and all the hard thinking to the reader, which is not good writing.